Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we're in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Innu, Cree, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. My name is Lynn Nesbitt. I'm chairing the panel today. Joining me on the panel via Zoom are Carrie Linklater and Cynthia Stevens. The secretary to the board is Belen Rojo, and our assessor is Jeremy Pohl. We'll be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application. We will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that we mail to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the Board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I'll confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all of the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. We'll be hearing items 1 through 8 on our docket today. Ms. Rojo, please affirm the assessors and the applicant's testimony.
Mr. Assessor, please state your full name.
Jeremy Ryan Pohl.
And you affirm the evidence about to present is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Mr. Applicant, please state your full name.
Marcelo Navarro.
And you affirm the evidence about to present is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Pohl and Mr. Navarro. First on our docket is 444 St. Mary Avenue. It's assessment that we're hearing today, right? No other issues? Okay, Mr. Pohl, you can start us off, please.
Okay, so we'll just go over this briefly. I'll present the quantum argument. I'll touch base on the 444 St. Mary's Great West Life Municipal Board order that was released, which is subject to the lease that's in place for Great West Life, which occupies the building. I have rebuttal information as far as the lease that was submitted at appeal at the municipal board, and I'll touch base on why that rent is not at market, as well as what I believe which is an error, which the board made for a decision for the municipal board for the business, which was for an assessment in 2014. So I'll briefly go over it just to declare that it is at market and shouldn't be used. And aside from that, we'll get straight into the brief itself. Would you prefer for me to do the rebuttal after my brief's presented, or should I just speak through it as I go along? It would be quicker if I did that.
Typically we are hearing rebuttal after Mr. Navarro's presentation. Would that be okay? Or would you like to deal with that after your presentation?
I think in this instance it would just flow better.
Okay.
In place, that's all that they're doing. I'm just showing what the lease actually was and the associated reason why it's underneath.
Okay. Your voice does taper out every once in a while, so if you could be conscious of that.
I will try. I apologize.
Thank you.
Okay, so is it okay if I start then?
Yeah, please do.
Okay. File number is 221179. Roll number is 12093702,000. Civic address is 444 St. Mary's. The 2023 assessment is for $49,748,000. I believe it should be maintained here today, and I'll go into the reasons as why. Building was built in 1976, has a leasable area of approximately 247,287 square feet. If there is approximately 168 indoor parking stalls, and outdoor there's 353,000. So if we go to page 3, is the write-up on it. This is straight from Morguard's website. It is a Class B or B prime, B plus, however you phrase it. It's an executive high-rise office tower. As you can see, it's certified gold and silver. It's won the Trilby Award. It's a prominent building in downtown Winnipeg. So if we flip over to my page 10, shows the aerial photo of the property. It is the tower plus the parkade attached to it. You look next to that, just some aerial side photos of the property. As we go through it, just a few photos attached to get a feel for the property. It's high quality space. Most of this is Great West Life.
Sorry, Mr. Pohl, that doesn't look like the right building to me.
444 St. Mary's. Yeah.
Okay. That looks like Broadway to me.
No, there's one very similar on Broadway, the 363 Broadway. That is the.
Sorry. I'm sorry. These are your rent comps, are they?
No, this is the subject property. That's 444 St. Mary's.
Okay.
Okay.
It has Great West Life on the side. It's what was Great West Life building. So, do we need to take a moment there? I just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
No, go ahead.
So as we go through, just some photos of the property. It was an inspection done with the building. As far as the 444 St. Mary's Great West Life appeal, Great West Life approximately occupied a third of the building at one point in time. And we'll get into that lease as we go along. So on page 21 is just some listings of the property. As indicated, 444 St. Mary's. And we see that asking rents that are associated to get in with the building, I think $16 and $18. We see that on page 24 is the mailer. On page 24, there's 363 outdoor stalls, and they're in at $215 a stall. There is some underground parking in the building as well, because it's not included there. As we go along, on page 26 is the analysis or financial statements that they submitted. As you can see, the rents that are being achieved in the building, the cost associated with it. As we go along, bear with me here. As we go along to page 29, they're declaring a $3,034,000 NOI. What they're also declaring is a little bit less parking income, and that you would expect given the nature of COVID. People aren't parking in the parkade as much, obviously. So you're going to expect a little bit less for rent collected there, but that would be a temporary short gap, and we'll anticipate that in the future. So that's the little difference there from our workup. You start on page 33, highlighted in blue for your convenience are all the rents that are in place in the building. As you can see, most of them are $14, $16, $15.
Excuse me, Mr. Pohl. This says at the top it's as of May 1st, 2022. No, post reference, yes?
No, this isn't post reference. This is just when you date it and send it to us.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay.
I've had some issues with, just so we're clear, I've had some issues with Morguard and how they present some of the information. Just this is what they sent to us for 2022 or for 2020.
Okay.
So, as you go along, just highlighted blue, you get a feel for the building as it performs. 14 on the low side, 16 or so on the high side, around those ranges until you get to the Canada Life Insurance Company, which is former Great-West Life, and you can see that it's $11.50. When they moved into the building, it was $8, and I'll get to that in a moment. As you can see, it's out of line with the building itself, and it's out of line with the market. This is a executive class B prime. There's no way that it should be performing at an $11 rate, especially when 1/3 of the building is around there. And when the lease was originally signed, it was about $8. It was $8. So there's no way that 1/3 of the building should be at that rate. It stuck out. It stuck out at appeal. We went into it in detail over 4 days at the municipal board. And we have an order which I'll reference. And then, of course, the lease that I'm going to bring in. So, as we can see, the vacancy in the building is about 16% right now. And it was under that leading up, and I'll get to my study in a moment. So on page 39 are actually two comparables for cap rates. These are actual cap rates, direct cap rates from the market I've done myself, on sales that have occurred. 240 grand is a half interest sale, and the cover is just over 6% for stabilized. It is a B prime. It is also for April 1st, 2014. Again, a 2 years from this reference date for this deal. But this is the best market indicator that we have for direct evidence, as there's not that many that have actually traded hands. So similar idea for 220 Portage. It was 2 half interest sales, which was acquired by Artist Street, and you can see the rents that are in place. Great-West Life also occupied this building, a large portion of this building, about 60% or so of the building, and known to the Artist Street that the lease for that building would be ending. So there would be an expectant either release of the building, or there would be leaving of the building of Great-West Life with a large vacancy, which did indeed happen. And Artist Street did a splendid job of renovating this building, using the market vacancy, a higher than market vacancy, to go through 360 Main and go through this building here, 220 Portage, and fill it up and renovate it after the space was vacant to generate much higher rents than what were in place. So vacancy isn't always a bad thing. It gives you an opportunity to improve your space, be more competitive in the marketplace, gain a greater return on investment. So, next pages are page 40 to 42. I'm not going to go through every single order, but clearly we've submitted enough case law that shows that we do not account for tenant inducements, tenant allowances, free rent, leasing commissions, leasing expenses, things of that nature, any below line items. To date, I've seen multiple orders that say no. I have yet to see one that says yes. And no agent's been able to produce one. And until I actually see from the municipal board order reversing this case, this well-established case law, I'm not going to entertain inclusive of those below line items. We're here to determine what a net operating income is, not take what a net operating income is and further reduce it to a net income to owner. And that's not what we should be doing. Tenant inducements erode that. That's why these case laws exist. And I'll go for a good example of why we shouldn't do that. So moving on to the study, which is on page 43. Move into the study. I don't know. Typically, I would read it word for word, as it's only 2 pages. Is that necessary today, or did the other 2 panel members have enough understanding?
I think if you just hit the highlights, you don't need to read it word for word.
I'll just do it. Summary: the marketplace study main purpose is to ensure fair and equitable assessments for this property type class. The study is also being used for appeal defense at the Board of Revision for the 2020 assessment. The study is a source from a 6-year review of every OFB property that operated on a net rent basis. The study encompassed 17 OFBs, 403 commercial rental units or CRUs, and over 2.3 million square feet of leasable inventory. The study examines individual both these properties and the global marketplace, and cross-reference it findings against outside sources in terms of owner advertised leasing activities. All parameters in the study are isolated to individual years and are in relationship to each other to ensure proper and accurate year-by-year analysis of the marketplace for assessment purposes. The study yields the best market evidence to determine assessments on a fee simple basis. So what does that mean? We're looking at the rents that are new or the rents that are in place, changes in rent, kitchen step-ups in the years associated with the cost for those years, the vacancy, shortfall, and non-recoverables. Everything is in linear relationship in that year. We're not going outside, we're not back. We're looking at every individual year for 6 years to get a good understanding year by year what the marketplace is. The way that this is studied, the way this market analysis is done is to catch step-ups that increase. So we're not looking at a rent that was tenant induced at a lower rent, and then 3 years into a 5-year initial term starts escalating a bit, and then the third term or second term starts escalating a bit more to bring it back to market. Typically, if you improve your building as a tenant, someone else is building as a tenant, and you offer some things to the owner that they would incur cost for on their own, you're going to get a reduction in rent for the initial period, as long as you complete your full term. Meaning, usually you're not going to get a tenant inducement for a 3-year lease only. It'll be a 5-year term, 3 terms with an option, usually around there. And if you complete your full lease with all terms, you get your tenant inducements, you get your reduction. But if you don't, you have to pay. And more importantly, if you vacate the building early, your improvement that you made to the building, the capital investment and the renovation of the building for those tenant improvements don't go with you. They stay with the property owner. You improve their space for them. It's risk that's mitigated with those circumstances. It's atypical. It's not market usual, but it's beneficial for both parties. But it's a unique circumstance that doesn't meet a typical leasing arrangement, and I'll get into that in a moment. So, because that happened for Triple Four St. Mary's. As we go along, we use averages, weighted averages, and medians as it's the proper metrics to be using. We exclude a partial of the 2021 year as we didn't get that information in time to include it in the study, and more so the order for the multifamily municipal board that occurred, which this study reference indicates you shouldn't be stepping out of line of full years to grab a expense or an item out of line with what the year you're looking at. Since we can't examine the full 2021 year, I'm not going to include it in it. Getting on to the rent. The rents are what they are. I can go through this in full, but rather I think the best way to do it is just to flip over to the chart. You can read through here. At your leisure. Apologize for the coughing. On page 46, the top chart. This is the global marketplace. All of the properties summed up. You see that there's an average, weighted average, and median. There's also min-max. Min-max are there to ensure that you're not putting these properties in at low minimum rents or maximum rents. The assessor nor the agent nor the panel member should be looking to the max or minimum rents unless there's good reason for it. Either really building that's way outperforming the marketplace, or a building that is, quite frankly, way underperforming the marketplace. We should be sticking in within one standard deviation of the study, which I'll get to in a moment, and at the extreme ends be looking further than that. A good example is that if our market average comes in at X amount, and you look at the lease, or you look at the contract rents that are all there, if it's a number of populace, if none of them achieve what we're saying, then that's cause to look at and go, hey, we said X amount of rent, it's never been achieved in this building. Okay, we should be making an adjustment there. Or if you look at the rent that's in place for the average or the weighted average of the median, and you look and go, well, majority, if not all the contract rents are exceeding the marketplace, better than average, then you should be looking to increase it from the average. So when we're looking at $14.39, which is the 3-year stabilized, and I've done a 3-year stabilized look, not just the 2020 year, we should be using that as a dial indicator. So when you look at in green, one standard deviation being a median of $14.39, the building's exceeding that, it's a prime, it's better than average, then you should be looking to a bit better than that average. Whereas if it's a B minus or not lower class B, then maybe you should be putting in a bit under that. In this case here, the subject property is an executive prime B. So as we go along, we see that at the reference here is $14.84 for the weighted average. Stabilized again, $14.39. I took an average because, again, we can't look forward because of post-reference information, but we can look backwards. Usually we were always looking at just 1 year, isolated to 1 year, pushing the reference date. I didn't feel that was appropriate for these property type classes. The A's and B's are heavy investment grade property. We should be looking at it at least on a 3-year look, stabilized look, to give it a realistic, purchaser is going to be right on this format. They're going to be looking at more than 1 year. So I looked at 6 and I stabilized it. Leading up to the reference date, I apologize. So the weighted average for the marketplace for vacancy was 12%. The vacancy average was 13.6%, and the vacancy median was 8.7%. And these CRUs, we looked at 217 CRUs that leased up stabilized, greater than that if you had the other 3 years, but we have 217 comparables to draw from for the stabilized look. And that's, of course, a little over 1 million square feet of inventory. So we have a very large section of the marketplace. As far as shortfall, we see a $13, $14, and $14.09, or a $13.88 average. A weighted average, I should say, the average is $14.05, and the median is $13.60. And as far as non-recoverables, again, we're going to differ from the development because we're not including tenant inducements and all of what I just earlier stated. That non-recoverable not being reflected here, that's been extracted out where possible. There are some properties that simply give you a lump sum, and there's no way for us to itemize what's in the non-recoverables, unless I know for a fact that I should be taking it out. I'm going to leave it in just as an error collection. So when we look at the non-recoverable average, it's at 3.6%, and it's 3 for the weighted average. It's 3, and the median is 9%, so 0.9%. So when we look at that over 1 million square feet and 217 variables, we're not bringing in 10, we're bringing in 8, 20. We're bringing in the entire lease up of what happened in the marketplace, as well as any increases in step-ups, which are reflected. So in place at the reference date, you have a very good indication of what the market is. Next from that, below the chart, I should say, if we highlight on the chart, just so we're clear, that we're using 3 standard deviations, which is typical for statistical analysis. 1 standard deviation is 16% of the marketplace. 2 standard deviations, which is in yellow, on either side, adds up to approximately, I believe it was 27% of the marketplace. And then the other 5% or so is past the 95% confidence interval, which you shouldn't be looking at. Those are gross outliers. So as we go along, I'll just touch base. Back on page 45, I should have mentioned this. There are a few that are lower. And look at the triple quadruple asterisks. Note 26 of the rents in place in the lower end of the range of the second standard deviation. 8 of them have tenant inducements at 363 Broadway, and 8 of them are in a lower performing property at 175, 185 Carlton, which is being converted over partially to multifamily to address the long-term chronic vacancy issues there. So that property there, I've been through it with Rod. It kind of stuck out, and we'll get into the study. It stuck out to the point where something was going on, and sure enough, when we went in there, it was purchased and it's being redeveloped. The main floor should be retail, restaurant related, that kind of thing. The 175 portion of the building is being converted over to multifamily, and then I believe the remainder of it going up is going to be offices, and so it had tenant rooms that were going through as we were there. So it looks like it'd be about 40% of the building will remain office. The main floor again retail related, and then apartments on the side. So if I knew that before I made the study, I would have redacted that property out because it no longer fits as it's more of a multi-use building that may be inclusive once it stabilizes and get a better look at it, but the building's in flux. Going through on page, continuing on 46, Below the chart gives you a breakdown of the rent ranges. How many are how many CRUs leased up within what rent range? And as you can see, between $14 and $15, it's 76. And then on the opposite side, it's $13 to $14 is 38, and 15 to 59, or 15 to $16 is 30. So you see, it's a pretty strong market with a bit of a shift to the right, which indicates a stronger market overall, especially when you take up the tenant inducements, which is on the yellow, which is on the second standard deviation, which is on the left-hand side, when you include the series that I just mentioned, which are typically, again, a lowest performing property. So you see the strength is really from $13 at a minimum going up to about $17, with most of the strength being around 14 to 15. And you can see that reflected in the simple property. So when we get to the Johnson report, below that, we see that this is what the Johnson report's saying: 10% for vacancy, stabilized for the 2018 to 2020 year, and $15.57 for the weighted average. For the Johnson report, we have the sister analysis at $15.37, 11% for weighted vacancy, and they of course give us a sharp shortfall that we can work from, and it's at $14.59. So when we get to the subject property, that's on page 47, and we see 444 St. Mary's, which is third down. We see overall that within the years leading up to the reference date, we have 15 CRUs that leased up, and they average $14.72. Weighted average $14.43 for the average, and $15 for median. And again, the min-max ranges in there were $12, and the max was $16. So, and the stabilized vacancy was at 9.3%. So we see a building that where you expect it to be. It is a prime building. It is a better than average OFB, and it should be assessed appropriately. When we go to the next page, we see the remainder of the OFBs, and you can go to them yourselves if you like. And I'll just touch base with what I was indicating. For 185 Carlton, which is just above the Johnson report on the last page of page 8, you see that there is long-term chronic vacancy in that property, hovering around 30%. And then you see that the non-recoverables are 18.3%, and the shortfall's at $23.62. The numbers went so way out of whack that I requested, like there was just something going on. And then when me and Rod went through the building, it was quite clear that it was being renovated. Some of those costs are skewed. That's why you really shouldn't be. If I would have known it now, I would have redacted it out of the study, and in future I'm going to be, or at least keep a close eye on it. That way, you shouldn't be having an outlier like this for the study. So, next up is the Johnson report data. You can look at the entire OFB populace that's being advertised. These are the rates that are being advertised by the ownership groups, with their associated shortfall and the vacancy. So when you see 444 St. Mary's, it's at the very bottom of each year. Starting in 2015, they had an 8.5% vacancy with a $13 net asking rate to get in. In 2016, 8.1, 13% vacancy. 2017, 2.5 with a $14 asking rate to get in. 18, 2.2 with a $14 asking rate to get in. 19, 5.6 with a $15 net asking rate to get in. And then again, 5.2 in 2020 vacancy and a $15 asking rate to get in. So as you can see, their vacancy that they're actually advertising is even under what they're reporting. And again, some of this is like for the OFB stat or what the properties, a better prime building has a waiting list to get in. It's smaller than a class A building, obviously, but there is still some. You're only advertising the space that you need. If there's already committed space for other tenancies waiting to get in, you're not going to be advertising that to the marketplace, and you need exposure to account for that. So hopefully that gives you a good feel for the building, gives you a good feel for how it's performing. So now from that, we can go back to how we assessed it. And it only did 2 more minutes for this one. So on page 4 starts our workup. So for the 247,000 some odd square feet, we have $14.55 average. That is just above the 3-year stabilized, and that is under the 2020 weighted average. So being really conservative, we'll put it right at average, just a shade above average if you look in 1 year. When you look at the vacancy that we put on, which produces a PGI of 3,599,000 approximately. Our standard parameters apply, which 11%, which is bang on with market. Our 3% for non-recoverables, which is bang on with the study and market. And when we see the shortfall at $12, we're a couple dollars less than what's being applied by market, but it's still, it's an average over populace of a lot of owner-occupied buildings too. So when the modelers grab all the OP populace, I'm just looking at the ones that rent on a net basis, about 17. There are many other ones that are owner-occupied. So when you do it in a larger sample size, a cost whether it's paid by a tenant or a cost whether it's paid by the owner is still the same. So I'll differ to the shortfall to the modeler study at $12. So that produces a net operating income of $2,780,000, capped at 6.75%, gives us a capitalized value of $41,199,000 approximately. Highlighted in yellow, and I'll get to that in a moment. I think I already touched on it, but the net operating income reported by the owner is $3 million, just a little over $3 million. And when you add in our parking structure, which is on page 6, you see that there is 353 outdoor stalls at $92 a stall, and heated indoor stalls at $168 at $103.50 a stall. Gives us our net operating income of $598,363, capped at 7%. Gives us our 8.5 or so million. So when you look at page 7, we see overall we have a $3.378 million net operating income. Now that is just shy of where they are, but that's reflected because the parking income stream, what they're reporting in 2020, would have been affected by COVID. Not as many people parking downtown, more people from home. We're still under the health authority of working from home. Most people were. So that's going to be a little bit artificially low. Years past, around 600,000 or so net operating income for the subject property. Parkade, a big parkade, is typical. So when we're looking at a $3,379,000 NOI, it's a very good estimate of value of what's there and reflective of what's there. And you see that in the rent roll, and you see that in the cost, and you see that in the vacancy, with the exception of that little blip to the parking, which we all should be aware wouldn't continue into the future. Look at that, expecting that to continue into the future. So with that, the two income streams added up gives $49,748,000. That's what we're asking to be confirmed here. I can go into the lease now if you like, or I can wait. I think it kind of flows better if I just do it now. Say it'll only be a couple minutes.
Sure.
So as indicated, I sat in for an assessor who no longer works for us to handle the business assessment appeal of the board revision for 2014 appeal, which was Great West Life. In that hearing, this lease was dropped on us. It was not submitted as part of the evidence. It was submitted in hearing at that moment. We did not get enough time to look at it. The hearing was already delayed for, this must have been almost 2 years based on COVID and rescheduling and our assessor leaving and taking it over. The appellant had lots of time to get this lease. We didn't get it until the day of the hearing. We took half an hour to look at it. It's fine print, 60 some odd pages long. We didn't get enough time to fully absorb it. There's some issues that we can raise now. So part of what was adjusted there was the greatness light moving into the building. And in a nutshell, they paid 2.7 million or so to renovate the space for tenant improvements for them. They paid. They were able to recover, that works out to be $31.66 a square foot. Through Morguard, they recovered $11 a square foot. The remainder of that is $20.66 a square foot. We explicitly stated that in the hearing. It was correctly stated in the hearing, and yet the board indicated there was no real indication of a tenant inducement. I'm not sure how you missed the $20 as there is. Moving forward, this lease was dropped on us, and I'll get to that in a moment. But not only is this lease, maybe I'll touch base, I'll touch base on the lease first. It'll make a lot more sense. If you turn to the lease, again,
Just give us a minute to catch up with you. Bella, is it in a it's obviously in a separate document, right?
The rebuttal?
Yeah. Yes, do we have it?
Yes, it's called ANT rebuttal.
Yeah, I got it. Oh, I can't. If you will, I can't have access to this.
Cindy and Carrie, do you have it?
Yeah, we have security software in our email that sometimes puts things into, and I can't open it.
It says, Jeremy, it says Norgard Investments on the top.
I can't hear you.
It says Morguard Investments on the top, the rebuttal. Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, I've got it. Thanks.
Can you put it
Why am I not able to find it?
It should be right under, let me look again where I found it here. It's right under Jeremy's brief. The next item under Jeremy's brief, I think.
32 minutes ago. Okay, got it. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Paul.
We need Marcello to have a look at
Oh, okay.
Share your paper copy?
it. Not really.
I can dump it in the file for you if he gets your paper copy.
Does he not have access?
He does not. No, it's a recording. So
Oh.
you and the panel get.
If he wants to, I can step back and read, and he can read from the PDF if he likes. He doesn't have access to what you have access to.
No.
I didn't realize coming here was the city. I thought this was for you.
It is, but it's we made a special user for you and the panel.
If you want, I can just hand it to you when I'm done reading. Get a minute to look at it.
Sure.
Yeah, if it saves time, because we've got a call to go through. So, in a nutshell, the municipal board was a business assessment appeal, and it was based on the lease premise. And as the charter defines the lease premise, the argument from the agent should be inclusive of all what was leased. And the board accepted that, but for a business assessment appeal, not for realty. It's realty separate. It's not under the charter. So, having said that, we got this lease. I had about 30 minutes or so to look at it. When we go through the lease, highlighted in yellow for your convenience, there are several CRUs and leased premises. I don't know how many times it says leased premises, must have been well over 100 times. It's not one leased premise, but the board chose to go that way because it's a business assessment. They defined a different kind of rent for a business assessment appeal versus a realty appeal, which I'm still kind of mystified over. But having said that, getting to the real part of it is when you go through it, starting on page, I guess one, well, they're labeled a little differently. It's not my labeling, but where it says page 1 of the term sheet, you can see how the rents escalate from $8 and they go up to 11 over the life of the lease of all this leased premises. Right away, when you see the building performing at around $13 to $15 at that point in time, now it's 14 to 16 or so, gives you a moment to pause. Why is it so low? Why would a prime building managed by Morgan, a great company, well versed in the marketplace, accept an $8 rent, which is $5 below the average? in their own building for a third of their building. Well, it was pretty easy. When you go through the lease, as I pointed out, they paid to have their tenant improvements. They paid the $30.66. They got $11 rebate that counted for a little over $20. They didn't have to pay that themselves from mortgage, and they secured a long-term tenant. They had a large space go empty when Central Gas left. It was dated, it needed renovating. This is atypical for market, but it met both their requirements. But one of the other things that was quite clear, or I should say that wasn't quite clear, even though we had the legal counsel and we had the representative of Great West Life in the room to ask questions, they did not disclose. If you look to point 902, tenant insurance, and I'll wait till you catch up. It's about 20 pages or so in, and I apologize. It's on exactly page 20. Bottom left, bottom right corner, small print. It's their number, and I didn't renumber this. I'll just wait for you guys to catch up. Or ladies, I should say. Apologize. Once we're there, just let me know, because this is critical.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, so they did not disclose this, and 67 or so pages of fine print given half an hour to look through. My eye didn't catch it. Neither did our legal counsel. We did the best we could. So, tenant insurance. Great West Life is an insurance company, one of the national leaders, if not the national leader. At its own expense, the tenant shall take out and thereafter maintain in force at all times during the term and at all times when the tenant is in possession of the lease premises, insurance policy as follows. And you can read through it if you will, they took out $3 million. So at all times, they self-insured a third of the building for the property owner. That is a cost that the property owner would incur if they didn't particularly happen to have the biggest insurance company in Canada occupying the building, paying that for them. So when you do the tenant inducement, them getting paying for their tenant improvements and self-insuring their building, you now know why it goes from about a $13 rate average in the building to an $8 for Great West Life. It is completely tenant induced. It's atypical circumstances. All this was pointed out with the exception of insurance, because quite frankly, I wasn't able to catch it. And this should have been handed to the assessor well in advance of the hearing to go through. And the agent and the lawyer, legal counsel, and the representative for Great West Life should have been forthcoming and said this. They did not. They remained silent on the point. So as we go through, this again, not just the rate that they have because of the tenant, the physical improvement, the capital improvement, but also insurance. This leasee and lessor, and this is straight from real estate appraisal. This is straight in the order, and I pointed it out. The leasing lessor weren't typically motivated. You have a different kind of tenant in Great West Life who can insure your building for you. Other tenants can't do that. They have the ability to pay for a third of your building to be renovated. Other tenants can't do that. Main typical tenants can't do that. So at that point, they're not typically motivated. If you look at reasonable timelines for exposure, which is one of the tests for market, it was never exposed to market. They went out and attracted Great West Life from 330 Portage and from Air Canada building, and also from 220 Portage and amalgamated in 444 St. Mary's. So never tested the marketplace. And then the fifth point of 5, the rental amount represents the normal consideration for property lease unaffected by special fees or concessions granted by anyone associated with the transaction. Those are two very special and unique circumstances that the typical marketplace doesn't do. So when you look at the life of the lease, you see it starting to go back to marketplace, but also throughout the life of the lease, they're also insuring their own property. They're a third of the property for the property owner. So at that point, this should never have been inclusive of a rent. It clearly doesn't meet the definition of a typical lease. You have tenant inducements by ways of capital. You have tenant inducements by ways of them paying the insurance because, quite frankly, the insurance company. That reduces your net effective rent, and that's why you see a lowering of Great West Life from $8 to $11 throughout the life of this lease when the building's hovering in 2000. I I guess in reference date 2012, about $13, and to the reference date today, between 14 and 16. So where you see a $11 in place lease here, I don't think it should be put in. I think it needs to be removed from your analysis, same way I removed mine. And with that, I think I made my point pretty clear of why a third of this building shouldn't be at $11 contract rent. So with that, I'm open to questions.
Thank you, Mr. Poole. Mr. Navarro, do you have any questions?
Yes, Mr. Cole. So your contention here is that rents that were leased by Canada Life were not at market because inducements were being taken out.
Precisely, they were induced. They paid capital. They only recovered $11 of the little over $30 that they paid themselves. And Great West Life, or Canada Life now, insures half or a third of the building, their premises, instead of the property owner being required to pay that.
Okay, now, is this something that you have verified by talking to Morgard?
It's in the lease.
I'm not asking that. I'm asking whether you spoke to Morgard and they confirmed that inducements were in fact being taken out of that lease.
As I indicated, I spoke to legal counsel, Jim Murphy. I spoke to Brett Borgstrom, and I spoke to Richard Murderson, which is Great West Life's representative in the triple forcing here. So we have really well knowledgeable people.
And they all agreed that inducements were being taken out of that.
They all said there were no inducements. I asked them, how do you get $30 off of 11 to come to roughly $20? How is that not a tenant inducement?
So in fact, nobody from the opposing side has actually said that inducements were taken out.
They said there's not. From
You're basically contesting that position.
I can give $30, take away 11, and it doesn't come to nothing. And not only that, they remain silent on the fact that they self-insure the building. Great West Life pays that, not the owner.
Now,
They were very
you have had time to follow up with the property manager, correct?
If I needed to, yeah, I could have.
Okay. And did you bother asking the property manager whether that was in fact the case, that they were actually removing inducements from that rent?
I have it in the lease. It's very
Okay.
clear.
Mr. Poole, I mean, these can be yes or no answer.
No, I did not.
Okay. And in terms of the size of the lease for Great West Life, you're also contesting that this is not one lease.
All the leases, they have different start dates. I can go through that. Okay, they lease multiple CRUs. Mr. Borgstrom amalgamated them into one lease premise based on the charter. And that goes over the order that was associated with A22. So, reputation, when you remain silent, tenant insures the 30-year building for you. You shouldn't be doing that in this hearing. And then when you simply only get $11 back at the little bit of $30 that you put out, there's $20 remaining over the life of that lease. And when you add that back into the lease, you can see why it's low. It's not typical and it doesn't meet market standards. Market tests, I should say.
Now, what was the inducement that you're speaking of?
Great West Life paid to renovate the entire property that they occupied, 86 or so thousand square feet. They managed it, they did everything, and Morgard paid them, the property owner gave them $11 back per square foot. And like I stated, when you do the math on that, which is, it mystifies me how anyone can deny this, it's $31.66 based on the $2,748,680 permit for the space that they occupied. They got $11 square foot back. That leaves $20.66 unaccounted for. Just simply say it's not tenant induced doesn't fit reality. It's $20. And then when you leave out the fact that the other part of that, which is buried in the lease, which you could look at, was the fact that Great West Life self-insures a third of their building for them, the spaces that they occupy, which is roughly a third. That is a large cost.
Okay.
They're not doing that for free. They're taking a reduction back. That's another 10 million.
Now, in terms of the leases, you had mentioned that there's different lease start dates on everything, right?
Generally, yes.
Yeah.
They're-
So you had a chance to review the lease information, correct? It's highlighted in blue in your.
yeah.
Okay. Now, I'm looking at Canada Life right now, and this is taken straight from that report. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 leases in there that have a September 1, 2018 start date and August 31st, 2022 end date. Okay. And you're still contesting that.
There's still a self-insuring building for like at least it says very clear, as long as they occupy it, they will be insuring it. That's a large cost. When you put in, literally, when you renovate 830, someone's Class B prime building for them, you're going to get a reduction in rent. Those are atypical. Those don't meet market tests. This went over in the municipal order, and yet somehow, again, insurance was a point that was missed because they dropped this lease on us in hearing, and I had half an hour to look at it before a commentary on it. It was missed. But when you do those two factors over the length of the lease, that is good for both tenant and that is good for the tenant, that is good for the leasee, the building owner. It addresses both those issues for both parties, but that's not market. That's not typical market. It fails 3 of the 5 points for tests, for market tests. And that's standard appraisal theory. So
You mentioned in your presentation that Morguard is a very professional organization.
absolutely.
Across the country. So why do you think that they would give Great West Life a below average market rent?
Because they put almost 3 million into the building, insuring
Mr. Pohl, could you speak into the mic, please?
because they're insuring their building a third of it approximately over the life of the lease, and they improved their building, the capital of about a third of their building by investing almost $3 million. And it addressed a large vacancy within the building because Central Gas left, and those 3 factors played into that. It's beneficial for all involved, but it's not typical.
Okay. Now, we've also had conversations with Morguard regarding this, and you know what? I'll leave this for my own presentation. I'll move on to the cap rate. The global study portion. Actually, while glancing over a few things, I noticed on page 23 that.
And you're referring to the main brief?
Yes.
Mr. Navarro?
Yes, to the assessor's main brief.
23?
Yeah, so on the last updated portion, about halfway through the page, it says last updated 11/10/2022. That these rents are 16 to 18 asking. So that is actually post-reference. I'm actually looking at it on the internet right now, or I don't want to.
I apologize, that must have been post-reference. That would have been done in the spring of 2021, but I must have grabbed the wrong advertising.
And just to be clear that those are asking rents, those are not, and arm's length leases that have been agreed to, right?
Asking rents, and obviously the $18 would be most likely the retail space.
Okay. Now, in terms of your global study, and if you could turn to page 46. So at the very top, you have an average weighted average and a median for the rents. Is everybody following here?
Yep, page 46, yep.
So, and I'm just going to briefly highlight, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2000, because those are the most recent years. You're going from 1441 to 1411, 1406 to 1485. Over those 6 years that you stabilized at 1435 as an average $14.39, as a weighted average and a median of $14. Now, would you say that there is great variation in terms of those rents over those years? Because what I'm looking at looks like at the very most, very static rents that are not moving very much.
That is the average of them all. Like I said, there's lower, there's average, and then there's primes.
But this is your global study, so we're speaking on a global term.
On a global term of all the 17
Yeah.
that are leasing, that is the average, averages that you see.
And would you agree that they're not varying very much?
They're steady.
Now, if we look at the vacancy, again, 2017, 9.4%, 10.8, 14.5, 15.4. Over the 6 years, stabilized at 16.6 as an average, weighted average 12%, and a median of 8.7%. Now, I'm looking strictly at the vacancy average at this point, but what I'm seeing is an increase in vacancy starting in 2017. Would you agree?
From 15, you see 14.5, then you see 11.1, and 9.4, then a bit of a ride up, obviously trending downwards a little bit. And then you see it trending upwards a little bit as well.
Okay. And would you say that the pandemic has maybe had an effect on that vacancy in the latter year?
I would say no to that. Generally speaking, you're going to have a few tenancies that are not going to be able to make it through. But if your tenancies are not of an investment grade, meaning it's month to month or year to year, that's not a tenancy that you would generally put much weight to for the covenant for investment purposes. Usually it'll be like a 5-year term. And if you're more of an anchor tenant, it'll be several 5-year terms or whatever it'll be, an option where they work it out for. But that's typically what you would see. Those wouldn't be eroded by COVID. The ones that you're seeing are either, if you go through concourse areas, more retail based, some of these companies just couldn't survive it. And then if you're looking at the main office segment of buildings, only short-term, weaker tenants, which you wouldn't be for investment grade purposes or even for cap rates or anything really, you wouldn't really have any effect on that end.
But just to clear up, at least the last 3 years, we're seeing an increase in the vacancy.
Yes, the main thing that I look to that, and I'll be quite clear, if I'm going to sit there and gauge the marketplace, and I've done that, you see True North coming online, you see a prime building, a double prime building coming online, and you see the pulling out of grade A buildings and filling up within an economic year of a year and a half, 2 years. That's a blink of an eye for that double prime building. What you then are seeing is the movement from other buildings, such as B building, B primes, for those tenancies moving to A to fill those holes. So you've seen a bit of a shift, a ripple effect. And you would expect to see that, and that's what I think is playing out here in the marketplace. So I don't see this as being a long term. It's merely a bit of tenants changing hands. And you had 300,000 square feet get soaked up at True North that had a ripple effect in the marketplace, and it's working its way down the classes.
Okay, now that can be said also for your shortfall. Your shortfall is 1405. What is the shortfall that you've quoted in your? I use
believe it was 12. Okay.
And your non-recoverables average. Now, does that include structural reserve of 2%?
When I went through every INE financial statement, or whatever the hell they fill out, usually it's a financial statement. Like I stated, they will include tenant, or I should say non-recoverables, and then they'll list them off. Anything that is a capital nature, a below line item, I would not include. If it's general repairs and maintenance, yes. If it's something that, for lack of a better word, they put in a lump sum of a non-recoverable and they have an X amount, no itemization of that at all. There's no real way for me to break anything out of that. I would tend to lean with that unless it's so grossly above the market, like at 185, 175 Carlton, where it was considerably more than market. It stands out. You wouldn't be looking at that. And 185, 75 Carlton, I say it's a good example because when you look at the numbers, something was going on there, and then obviously when the product went built, showed it's not there.
Okay. Now, have you had a chance to inspect the building more recently, say prior to the reference date?
No, I haven't. Years every day.
Mr. Poole, could you repeat the answer, please?
No, I've been in virtually every building over the years. I've been doing this 18 or so years, 2004, if I do the math right. But this building I haven't been in the last few years. So I have been in it, just not recently.
And those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Navarro. Ms. Linklater, do you have any questions?
I have no questions at this time. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Stevens?
Mr. Poole, so you've provided us with this study, but then on your workup, is that all model driven or study driven, or the model just fell in line with the study?
The model, in this particular case, I didn't touch anything. It was all model driven. And I want to make it clear, as I did with the OFAs, I looked at the marketplace completely independent of the model. It's not influencing what I've done on those two studies at all. What I went through is directly to the source signees or the financial statements held out to us by the property owners or their agent. And I went through each property for 6 years. So for the A's and B's, there's 17 properties, plus a few that didn't make it, because they shouldn't be included in it, and as well as the 6 A's that lease out. So I've done 20 some odd properties, over 20 properties, and I've looked at every financial statement. I've looked at every rent roll, and this is where it's sourced from. So when I have my perception of what the market is based on these two studies, and I've done independent, once I get the modeler information and they come up with their values, I then cite the studies. Does this make sense? Does that make sense? And if something doesn't make sense to me, I make an adjustment for it.
Okay.
I'll point that out at appeal. I mean, an adjustment here or there.
Okay. Yeah,
This
understood.
is
Okay, yeah, I understand. But in this case, you did not override the model anywhere.
No, and the only thing that was really out of line, you could say arguably that it's a little conservative on the rent, but I'm okay with it where it is the shortfall, which I pointed out for both A's and the B's. And that's simply because I'm looking at just from the ones that rent. There's a lot of ones that are occupied that don't rent. So when modelers are looking at all the costs, the totality of each property type class, they're getting quite a bit more information. So I would trust that their cost values would be a little bit more accurate, simply because they have a larger sample.
Okay. Yep. Okay. Thank you. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Poole, we didn't really talk about the parking structure a whole lot. Can you please explain to me how the model came with these monthly rents? See, there's a different, you've used an unheated rent of 92 and a heated rent of 103.50.
Yep. If you look at the pictures for starting on page 10, it shows the rooftop parking. And if you look on the next pictures on page 11, off to the left-hand side of the top one, you see that it's exposed parkade.
Okay.
And then underneath all that, there is a smaller heated structure underground.
Okay.
So
Okay.
the modelers came up with what monthly parking would be. And I guess I can touch base on this a little bit later. The modelers came up with $92 for unheated. Obviously, you pay less to park outside than you would heated. I think everyone knows that. At 103.50. So those are the two rates that they established. But when I did for municipal board orders for 161, the NCA 161, which is North Main, south of Main, north of Broadway, Main to Memorial, they're only accounting for monthly parking. They're not accounting for event parking. They're not accounting for weekend parking, transient parking. So when I go to the municipal board and I run through all these numbers are generally higher per stall, per square for net rent, depending on the location of the subject property that you're looking at or whatever parking lot you're looking at. The closer
So in
you
this,
get,
okay, go ahead.
closer you get to True North, typically it increases. And in this case here, I haven't done a analysis up to date for this year, meaning I've done it for past years. I'd have to go back another 3 years and review it. But typically, these are conservative values. If you would be looking at event parking, transient parking, and weekend parking, you'd be adding to those values for as far as net rent per stall.
Okay, so just to clarify what you're saying, this does not include event parking, that sort of thing, daily parking. It's more the monthly rent parking.
It's still your bread and butter, but
and these rates are net?
yeah, net effect. Yes.
Okay. Do you know what they are gross? Or
Yeah,
what
they're on the ID, which is on page.
I guess what I'm after is the expense ratio.
I apologize. Page 24.
Okay.
They report for 363 outside. They don't report the underground. They report $215 for outside parking. Obviously,
Okay.
underground, but they didn't report that. In years back, they have. So.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That's all my questions. Mr. Navarro, whenever you're ready, please.
Yep. So we are looking at 444 St. Mary, and for the sake of making this go by faster, I'm going to skip over some of the sections like the intended user report, the intended user.
Sure.
The inspection of the property occurred on November 18th, and in terms of property pictures, the location, I'm sure everybody is familiar with this property and knows its general location. And I believe the assessor has already given a description of the property, so I didn't really need to get into that. So the main bone of contention is obviously the rent. And in terms of the rent, we've looked at outside rents in the downtown area, and we looked at a sample of them. Again, we came up with an average of $13.11, median of $13.25. We have an explanation there in terms of the property observations. However, ultimately, we go with the rent in place. And so I guess what we need to discuss first is the Canada Life property. So this is a significant amount of space. I believe in total it's about 111,000 square feet, approximately. However, there were some new areas that they took over. I believe unit 300, and I believe unit 800 were spaces that they took over. Now, part of the issue I think here is the issue of whether inducements are being taken out. And we have Mr. Pohl's interpretation here, and we have our own interpretation. So we went straight for the source for the answers, and that is Morgard, and asked them whether there are inducements being taken out. And to our knowledge, there are no inducements taken out. This is one broad lease for the most part, at $11.50 per square foot. And that is, I think, the reason for it being lower than the other spaces is because you're looking at a substantially larger space being leased out than some of the other properties. So they produce a lower rent per square foot. Now, as we look at these properties, as we look at these tenancies in total, we've reviewed all of them. We've provided lease start dates, any steps that have been included in there. And the rental average is $3.10, giving us an income of $3,229,282. You okay there?
I'm trying.
Okay. So we have a look at the vacancy year end. We've gone with a vacancy of 11% and a shortfall amount of $12. Non-recoverables, as many of you have already heard, we haven't deviated from the 5% that we use. We note that there is a 2% amount that is used for structural, and this is what I asked Mr. Cole, is whether that is separate in his calculation of non-recoverables, because there is two components to this non-recoverable amount. There is the structural allowance that we give for 2%, and then there is the non-recoverable beyond that. Now, the city uses, I believe, just 1% for that portion, other than the structural reserve, whereas we use 5% instead of the 1%. Now, we've also included some storage income, and in terms of the net operating income, we have a net operating income of $2,383,974, to which we've applied a capitalization rate of 7%, giving us an income value of $34,056,777. Now, in terms of the parking, you can look at it on page 21. We've used a parking amount of $1,032,299 times 45%, giving us an income. Sorry, $1,032,299 minus 464,535, and that is based on a 45% expense ratio. And I know that most of you have at one point or another heard me blur about that 45 to about 50% is typically what we use for expense ratios on parking. Those expense ratios have actually gone up, but for the sake of this valuation, I only used a 45% expense ratio. Our net operating income is $567,764. It's not far off of the city's. We've used the same capitalization rate. We come up with a rounded value of $8,111,000. In total, we are looking at $42,168,000. Now, in the appendix portion, you can see that we've included the income and expenses that we've reviewed. And again, we've reviewed leases going back quite a few years. Now, we've included this in our summary. We've included a few years in our summary, but you can look at that on your own time. Starting on page 123, these are the pictures that I took of the space. I noticed the 18th floor, because it is a Canada Life space, and so is the 16th floor. You can make what you want of it. I certainly didn't think that the space was overly grand. It is what it is. It's not the most appealing space. You can see some of the spaces on the 15th floor that are vacant now. Number 12 is the superannuation board. The 9th floor is PKF or PFK lawyers. and the parkade. And on the main floor, you can see the main floor as you enter the building. And the space that you're looking at on the left side is the former restaurant location. So that has been, I believe that's been vacant since 2020 and still vacant. And they're not really sure what they will do with this space. I guess its original purpose was to be there as a restaurant. It's quite a large space, and at this point, they haven't really figured out what they're going to do with this. So it remains vacant. I am open for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Navarro. Mr. Pohl, do you have any questions?
Just give me 1 moment. I apologize, I'm a bit under the weather. Okay. Can you please turn to your page? I believe it's 29. Yeah, midway down to net operating income of 4,067,000.
Yeah.
That's for 1 year. You go back to 2 years. But you look at the next page, which is your page 50. And this is straight inclusive of everything under their financial statement, non-adjusted by myself. Page 50, net operating income. 4,201,000. Top left-hand side. Page 119, last couple of people back on the back. For 2018, it says net operating income of 4.338 million.
Sorry, Jeremy, which page are we on? You kind of cut out.
119.
Sorry?
Now it's 119.
119.
Prior was 50, and prior to that, it was 29. So
Yeah, I caught the other ones. I just didn't catch the last one. Okay.
So we're just showing the leasehold, non-fee simple, the leasehold contract, financial performance of the building has been north of 4 million all 3 years leading up to the reference date. Correct?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So we go to page 20. We see that just first of all, your vacant spaces, you're putting in at $15. Correct? That's Altus's interpretation of space that if it were to lease up at the reference date, the rate that it would lease up for.
Sorry, where are you?
Page 20.
Yeah.
Highlighted in blue, all the vacant spaces are highlighted in blue, and they have a $15 rent. As they're vacant, I'm assuming if it were to lease up at the reference date, the $15 rate is what would be expected.
It's a market rate that we chose. Yes.
So if we're doing it from a fee unencumbered by lease, non-contract based, fee simple, the building's vacant and leasing up at the reference date, why would we not assume or why would we not conclude that a $15 overall rate would be at market with market vacancy, obviously?
Okay, so first of all, we're confusing two issues here. Now, our contention is that with the space that Canada Life has rented, there are economies of scale playing out here. That is why that rent is at $11.50. The rents that you are specifically highlighting, which are $15, are 1,480. Sorry, I can't even read this. 1,460 66 square feet, 33, 32, 1583. So much smaller CRUs.
So just from this perspective, when we're looking at your analysis, you were doing virtually an entire encumbered by lease analysis, leasehold analysis, with the vacant spaces that are there, you're putting market rent on.
We are putting market rent on all of the spaces. So the leases in place that we look at, we verify with Morguard to see whether they are at market. So that is the step that we go to. And that is the step that we went through to look at the Canada Life property, where we are getting a different picture than you are painting, because these leases are at market.
Let me just be clear. These leases that are in place at $11.50, which is a third or so, a little bit more than a third of the building, were in place for the 18, 19, and 20 years. And each one of those years, they showed an NOI non-adjusted by myself greater than $4 million each year.
Okay. So again, you alluded to this also, and you pointed it out that is looking at the leasehold interest, right? Yeah.
I look at both.
Right. And we are doing the lease, the fee simple interest, correct?
No, you're doing predominantly a leasehold with a fee simple for the vacant spaces.
No, we are doing a fee simple for the entire property. And I would add to that the spaces that we've looked at here have been verified to be at market. That's the step. That is the step that we've taken to actually verify that we are looking strictly at market rents. Some of the rents that you see here have been adjusted because they are vacant spaces. We have looked at those. They are much smaller spaces, but we are talking strictly about Canada Life being at $11.50. Again, this is an issue of economies of scale. It is not an issue of inducements. We are not taking inducements out of that rent.
Just a couple.
Another thing that I would like to mention is that in the issue of the leasehold interest, that doesn't include any adjustments for vacancy or shortfall or non-recoverable expense allowance, which are part of the market fee simple analysis that we do.
I would like to continue with questions. Just generally speaking, if I'm a tenant, or if I'm an owner and you're a tenant, if you go to insure my property for me, would you expect to get a break on rent? A discount on rent?
I'm not going to give you a break on rent, and that's not what
No, if I'm the owner and you're the tenant and you're paying me market rent, if you self-insure my building for me, would you not be expecting a discount on rent?
Not necessarily.
And if you were to renovate a third of my property for me, would you not be expecting
market rent? Is still the market rent.
So you'd be more than willing as a tenant to insure my property for me and renovate my property for me, and you would expect us to pay the same.
Whether the owner induces that space or whether they do it themselves, we are not adjusting that rent in any of those circumstances.
That's all the questions I have. I'll have a short summary statement.
Thank you, Mr. Pohl. Ms. Linklater, do you have any questions of Mr. Navarro?
Yes, I do, Madam Chair. Just a couple. Mr. Navarro, did you inspect this property?
November 18th.
All right, thank you. And you indicated in your brief that your verbal brief, you spoke to somebody or you spoke to Morguard directly?
Yes, we always speak to Morguard to verify these leases throughout our review process. So we start reviewing these properties early in the year, and we do a valuation report on them, which is what you will see on page 20. So that report is directly taken from our conversations and with Morguard in our analysis of the property.
Okay. And with whom do you speak with at Morguard regarding this property?
So if you look at the page 24, Patrick Comrie. So anytime we have any issue with any of the leases, we have any questions regarding Morguard properties, we get on the phone with Morguard and we ask them questions about whether this is at market, whether it includes anything other than market. So we're going through those steps to actually verify that. Apart from the reporting that they give us, again, we feel very comfortable saying that rent is at market. It is a very large space. It is essentially, except for maybe 2 units in there, which are spaces that Canada Life took over at a later date. There were one large space, one large lease.
Okay, I thank you for that, Mr. Navarro, and that's all my questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Stevens, do you have any questions?
Yes. So you and Mr. Pohl had a discussion earlier regarding the lease document and the indication of the payment of insurance. So, and you stated that you asked about inducements and were told that they did not exist. So how would you characterize that insurance on that lease then?
Not as an inducement and not included in the rent. So the first thing that we want to do is eliminate the fact that there is anything that is being deducted from the rent. And in our non-recoverable study, we go through some of the items that we deduct from the net operating income, not from the rent. Okay. So we have an allowance there for non-recoverable expenses that that is where we add the leasing commissions and some other costs associated with non-recoverables. Now, in terms of any other thing, no. I mean, we by practice do not remove anything from the rent. Rent is what it is.
Would you agree that that is a benefit to the landlord?
It may be a benefit in the grand scheme of things, like in terms of the operating of it, to some extent. I don't know, but at the same time, it's still not being deducted from the rent. So we are taking the stand that these are net rents. They are at market, and we are not deducting anything else from them. Again, we're making other adjustments for vacancy, other adjustments for shortfall, other adjustments for non-recoverables, structural, and our cap rate. But in terms of the rents are what they are. We're not taking any amount out of it.
Okay, thank you for that. I just have one other question. Your cap rate is slightly higher than the cities. You didn't actually, on the office tower, you didn't actually address that. Any comment as to how you landed there as compared to where the city is?
Well, the city is at 6.75. We're just a little bit above that.
Yeah.
And I would say that my reasoning for adjusting that cap rate is that anytime that you have one large tenant in a building, you have some additional risk.
Okay, thank you. And that's all I had, Madam Chair. Thank you.
And thank you. I have no additional questions. Mr. Pohl, desire for summation?
Yes, I do. There's a few points here. I'll be as brief as I can. If you look at my interpretation, nothing comes for free. Clearly, there's a contract in place. I'm not going to rely on hearsay information that it's not tenant induced. I can do simple math. The 3166 minus 11 gives you a $20 little enough for $20 tenant inducement. That's there. Insuring a property on this nature, a third of it, based on their leasable premise, the relationship to that, it's about a little over a third. There is a cost to that. They're not doing that for free. They're gonna get a discount in rent, and I think that's reflective of it when you look at the rent roll in place. You see that in the actual contract, the lease that I provided you. It's there, black and white. So moving on from that, we don't include tenant inducements. I believe the municipal board erred in their order. I'm not sure how they could possibly have erred because it was spelled out to them, with the exception of the insurance, which was not able to be reviewed properly because their legal counsel, literally in the hearing, following the appropriate evidence submittal guidelines. We were allowed about half an hour to look at it. Clearly, I missed that point. I would have raised it in here, and I didn't get a chance to. That's why it's not addressed in the order. It would have been addressed in full months before the hearing, or 14, 17, whatever days before, give me a chance to actually look at it, would have caught it. So that was missed in the order as well. Moving away from that, all 3 years that the appellant's provided, I've only provided one, but all 3 years has been north of $4 million for the NOI. That's inclusive of the rents and all costs, all leasehold contract that's in place, which includes Great West Life at 1150, which includes everything that they do. That has nothing to do with me and my interpretation of anything. So if you cap it even at the rate even at the rate that the appellant's seeking, you still get a assessed value that's north of what we have it in at. I think our model is very accurate based on market. I think the leasehold contract analysis is greater than our market analysis by a little bit, not by a lot, but a little bit. And I think overall our value is a conservative value, and it should be maintained here today. So with that, my submission.
Thank you, Mr. Pohl. Mr. Navarro?
Yes. So in summation, you have one large lease, Great West Life, at $11.50 for the most part. That is at market. Again, we've verified that. In terms of the leasehold analysis that Mr. Pohl is made references to, that again is a leasehold analysis. So it does not include those adjustments for vacancy, for shortfall, for non-recoverables, for structural that we typically make in a fee simple market analysis. So that is the key point, is that one is a leasehold analysis, one is a fee simple. And with the leasehold, you are missing those adjustments that would bring down that net operating income. That is my summation.
Thank you, Mr. Navarro. Okay, that concludes item number 1 on our agenda. I'm just trying to manage the time a little bit. Mr. Pohl has indicated he cannot go past 4 o'clock.
4:15, 4:20, that's about as late.
Okay, so then we do have time at least to do one more property. Should we take a 5-minute break, or is it the desire just to push on and with the second item?
I think I need 5 minutes.
I need 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a 5-minute break, but yeah, thank you. Okay, thank you. I'd like to call the meeting back to order, and we're now on item number 2 of our docket, 280 Broadway. So Mr. Pohl, when you're ready, please.
File number 221040. Roll number is 120977888300, 280 Broadway. The 2023 assessment for $18,634,000. The property is older property, Class B, average to bit below average. We have it built in 1957, site figure 1976. We have it for 160,210 square feet. We have it at a $13.32 for an average rental rate. If you reference the study, you can see that that's about $2 below what the asking rate is, and it's about $1 below what the stabilized actual achieved rent is. So again, we're grading it properly. It is a bit average to lower than average building. We have it assessed as such. We have vacancy. All our standard parameters apply. Vacancy of 11%. A shortfall of $12. Not expenses that are not recoverable at 3%. Produces a net operating income of $1,182,936, capped at 6.75, gives us $17,525,000. Pay particular close attention to the $1.18 million NOI. If you go to the next page, is the income for the parking stall. We have 52 stalls, non-heated at $80 a stall. giving us $49,920, capped at 4.5%, gives us $1,109,000. Again, $29,920 for the NOI. Synopsis is on the next page, page 5. And you can see the two income streams combined are for $18,634,000. The net operating income model is $1.2 million approximately. So from that, we can go to page 8. Just shows the building. It is a B average, a bit below average, but it's properly assessed as such. Pictures on page 10 as well. Moving forward, we see the INE that was submitted. They submit financials instead of filling out the INE. The COVID form is there. The COVID form is not filled out. We look on page 15, starting on the financials. You see the tenant inducement depreciations highlighted in yellow at $283,000 approximately. The rest of the rent is in place. And as you move through the financials, it becomes clear in the next couple pages. And if you go down, you'll see the expenses. And when you come to page 18, net operating income about a third down is $930,000. For the actual budgeted, it was $967,000. So roughly they're projecting what they're getting, $930,000. When you put back in the capital tenant inducements that you put in, it gives this model back to where our NOI was expected to be at. So again, this comes down to tenant inducement, tenant allowances, capital investment. That needs to be done in the and that's a difference you have to make a decision on here today. So on the next page is the rent roll. We see that it's Royal Bank. They occupy a kiosk. Obviously, it's just a teller at 67 square feet. And then the rest of the property is the province. The province is at $14.55, and most provincial leases aren't at a true net. They're usually at a semi-gross, but it appears here closer to a true net. Having said that, when you look through the billing and the financials, again, $930,000 yet on the 283,000 back onto that. It gives you essentially a model projection. So from that point, it's merely the capped rate that's 6.75 for the building, as well as the 4.5% for the parking lot. And when you look at the study itself, and this is where I was getting to how you use the study appropriately. You look at what the rent roll said. You see that it's one tenant, can't really use it. You see that it's an underperforming, or I won't say underperforming, it's still a B-class building, but it's just a little below the average. And we adjust for it appropriately. Where it's $14.39 on average, we adjust a little bit below for that. And the model came up for that. And there was no need for me to make further adjustments. It's exactly where you would expect it to be. And then further test of that would be going to the Johnson report. You see that $13 rents we're asking for in 2015. When you go into 2020, you don't see a $13 rent. Sure, I apologize. You see one $13 rent at 185 Carlton, which was the building that was underperforming, which was since converted to multifamily, retail, and some office still. So the one underperforming building, which actually had to be converted, is at $13 for some substandard space, obviously. For the majority of the marketplace is between $14 and $16. So when we have it modeled at $13.30. I think it's very fair and reasonable rent. So with that, I think 18,684,000 should be confirmed, and I'm open to questions.
Thank you, Mr. Pohl. Mr. Navarro, do you have any questions?
I think for the most part, I think we've covered most of the study at this point. This was all model driven and you haven't had any input in it.
I just made sure that, given the characteristics of the building, that it should be a bit below average, and the model produced a bit below average rental rates.
Right, right.
It fit the model, and it fit my analysis for as far as.
Yeah. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Navarro. Ms. Linklater, do you have any questions? You're muted right now, sorry.
Sorry, I'm on a different device, so I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens.
Just the cap on the parking, Mr. Pohl, is that the parking's all outdoor? Is that why the cap is lower?
Yeah, there's no, you don't need a structural reserve. There's no structure.
Yeah, okay, yeah, got it. That's all I had. Thank you.
And thank you. Mr. Navarro, you can begin your presentation, please.
Okay. Again, this is 280 Broadway. And this is on the corner of Donald and Broadway. And I inspected this building in the spring of 2022, I believe, with one of Mr. Pohl's colleagues. You can see a picture of it on page 6 and on page 7. Skip to the rent. So we have a blended rent of $14.27 on this one. It is a smaller area. There are some rents that are in place which I have not adjusted. And those are for the 67 square feet that are leased, and that is the bank teller machine area. There's a teller machine on the ATM, sorry, they're called ATMs now, on the main level. And there is a large lease of $74,838. That is the Government of Canada. And I believe the smaller lease of $15,888 is the province of Manitoba. The other rents have been adjusted, maybe a little bit aggressively on my part, but I've used overall rent of $14.27. Again, this building is $116,210. It is a smaller building overall, so that is probably the reason that we've elected to go with something around $14.27. However, while we have been aggressive on the rent, we have adjusted on the cap rate side as well. So in terms of the vacancy and shortfall, I will outline those on page 17. We've gone with a vacancy of 13%. If you reference back to page 14, you can see that the vacancy has been fairly consistent. So there has been a small adjustment on vacancy. $8.50 for the shortfall, non-recoverables at 5%, 2% other. And in terms of net operating income, we have a net operating income of $1,213,699. So in comparison, I believe we are just a little above the assessor. And where we have adjusted is obviously on the capitalization rate. So there is a significant difference between the assessor's cap rate of 6.75 and 7.25. I would note that this is an older building, so we have adjusted the cap rate to reflect that. I know this building quite well, having inspected it at least. I think this was my third time in the last 4 years, but previously to that, I also worked in it for about 5 years. So I know it bottom up. And it is on the lower side of the B side. It's not on the top side. So we have adjusted that capitalization rate to reflect that. And on page 19, you can ignore page 18. I don't know why that's there. That's a different parking lot next door to this property. On page 19, you can see that I believe we've pretty much agreed with the assessor in terms of valuation of the parking lot. I don't think there's any dispute in terms of the parking lot. So we have, or a minimal dispute. We're at 998,400, whereas the city is at 1,109,000. In terms of overall value, the OFC is, and this is on page 20, if you're following. So we have 16,740,677 for the OFC, 998,400 for the parking lot, for a total of $17,739,077, and the city assessment is $18,634,000. So we have rounded it to $17,739,000. In terms of the evidence on page 22, you can see the stacking plan for the property and the income and expenses that we've looked at. So I'm open for comments or for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Navarro. Mr. Pohl, do you have any questions?
Just a quick question. It seems to come down to capitalization rate for this property. Can you turn to page 7? Can you brief?
Yeah.
We have it classified as B.
Okay.
And again, as I stated, average, bit below average B. You have it classified as a B, or I've seen B in your income approach, which is on page 11. You stated to be, you'd be doing B comparisons, but stated to be again on page 12. But then when you look at your page 20, it appears you put a C income stream on it and put a cap rate for a C building, 6.725%.
So the OFC thing at the top, as you can see in the valuation on page 17, you can see that I haven't deviated from that, right? So there is a label there that says OFC, but I have not considered this an OFC. So sometimes when we have these charts, we're cutting and pasting from previous years. And what I believe what was done in the previous cycle is that we had tried to type it as an OFC. However, we're not suggesting it's an C. And in fact, the valuation is consistent on page 17. So it has been valued as a B. The cap rate is high, but then again, this is an older building. There have been some renovations, but not substantial. Most floors have not been renovated. There is some vacant space in the basement, and then there is some occupied space in the basement. But the basement is primarily used for storage. So again, I think for the most part, we've made appropriate adjustment in this case. We've got a higher net operating income, but in terms of the capitalization rate, we've gone with a higher capitalization rate to reflect the fact that it's on the lower scale.
To be clear on page 16, I just want to make sure you're as a C or as a B, and you're claiming it as a B, and your average for B was 6.75. Let's go around. And then this one on page 16 at the bottom should be 7%, based on what you're increasing from 6.75. But then on page 17, your analysis moving forward, it's 17. For the period before we made the adjustment from 6.75 to 7, and then did it again by a quarter basis point.
Okay, so yeah, so that is not the capitalization rate that I went with. Okay, so it is what's actually in the calculation, 7.25, and again we show it again on page 20. It's 7.25%. Again, what I will say about that is that it is strictly based on the quality of the building, which I think is lower. And, you know, we call it a low B, but it's right on the cusp of BC.
That's all the questions then.
Thank you, Mr. Poole. Ms. Linklater, do you have any questions?
Yes, just one question. Mr. Navarro, so you are saying this building is on the cusp between a B and a C. The city has it as an effective age of 1976. You indicated that some floors are renovated and others aren't. And that you worked in the building, so and you've inspected it. So can you give us some description of what is renovated or what the renovations look like and what the unrenovated floors look like? Just speak to the condition of them.
Yeah. So most of the space in the building in floors 2, 3, 4 have not been renovated at all. So you're looking at space that is probably in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 years old. And, you know, it would show its age at this point. Now, some of the upper floors have been renovated, and those are the spaces for the federal government, Public Works. So that is more modern finish, probably in the last 5-6 years. And also in terms of the elevators, the main lobby, those have been, I believe, updated as well. But as you walk into the building, it doesn't have the presence of your better Bs. You walk in and straight ahead of you is an elevator. To the right or to the left is a large vacant area that probably hasn't been renovated in 20 years. And again, to the right is the same thing. So I would say that probably about 3/4 of this building have not been updated.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear that last statement.
I would say that approximately 3/4 of this building have not been updated.
I thank you. That's all my questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Stevens, do you have any questions?
No, I'm good. Thank you. No questions.
Okay, and my question about the cap rate was also discussed, but Mr. Navarro, why did you use a 5% cap rate on your parking?
So in terms of the parking, I have had a disagreement with the city of Winnipeg regarding parking for many years now. And I know that the city in some cases is using 4.50 as a capitalization rate. And that notes what they say is the low risk in the property. However, this cycle, taking into account the pandemic, most parking incomes have been devastated. I mean, some as high as 50% cuts in their income from previous years. And that is something that has continued going forward. So we know that there is an effect on office tenancies in terms of people working from home or the hybrid model. And that has affected parking because in the downtown, the two are interrelated. So also in speaking with parking owners, many have had to make moves to actually write down their assets. So it hasn't painted a very good picture in terms of parking in general. And we think that there is some risk to that. So we haven't adjusted our cap rate from the previous cycle. I mean, we've gone with a 5% cap rate in the previous cycle. And again, we've stuck with that.
Thank you, Mr. Navarro. Mr. Poole, is there a desire for summation?
It's pretty straightforward.
Mr. Navarro?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. That concludes item number 2. Moving on to item number 3 on our agenda, 386 Broadway. So, Mr. Pohl, when you're ready, please.
File 221161, roll number is 12092656 386 Broadway. The 2020 assessment is for $23,510,000. I'm recommending that it be maintained. This property is on Broadway, built in 1976. There's 131,000 square feet of leasable area. And there's 83 indoor parking stalls. On page 3 is the property itself. It is classed as a B prime. This has formerly been referred to as an A, but it's been downgraded since when I first started. It's commonly referred to as an A minus, but okay, B prime. As you can see, it straddles the line between. It's a prominent building, Broadway, just opposite the law courts. On page 4 is a bit more information on the property. We have it modeled at $14.65, which produces a PGI of approximately 1.9 million. All standard parameters apply again at 11% for vacancy, 3% for non-recoverables, $12 for shortfall. Produces a net operating income of 1.487 million, capped at 6.75%. Rounded gives you 22,037,000. The same underground parking, or in this case here, it's not quite underground, but it's underneath the main building, and it's $103.50 a stall for 83 stalls. So capped at 7% gives you the 1.4 million for value for the parking. On page 8 is a synopsis of the 2 income streams. Again, overall, pay attention to the overall $1,590,000 net income. The estimated market value, of course, combined is $23,510,000. So getting on from there, page 11, you see that it is a prominent building on Broadway. It's very unique as far as the steps, fascia, as you see going up the building. The building envelope is striking as far as the year that it was built. Again, but it was a former A and now created above average. On page 14 is the rent roll in place. You see it's predominantly net. There are a few gross leases in place. Province of Manitoba is in there. From the ones that are net, they range from $14.1575 generally, $113. I believe there's $116. So $15.75. So overall, the vacancy is about 16.3% in this given year. On page 16 is the actual performance of the building for their statement. Highlighted in yellow at the top is their revenue, basic revenue. They have free rent for about $3,800 into $1.8 million. I don't remove $3,800 anything. It's on that side of things. It's so minuscule it doesn't matter, but it is there. Overall, you see them just underneath the $2 million PGI. As we move along, we have approximately just shy of 300,000 to vacancy, highlighted in yellow, middle of the page. And on page 17, highlighted in red, their fees for administration fees, which is typically recovered in the marketplace. Here it doesn't appear to be, for $172,000. You see their major amortized repairs. So again, this is more capital cost. It's not like it's in that year they're paying in and it's a fluctuating amount that typically they would be recurring. They're amortizing the larger sum that they paid over the years at $339,000. And then major amortized or repair amortized again below that for another 88,000 or so. So if you look at that, that's about 500,000 or so that we would typically add back in. But when you look at it in total, the net income, even with me not touching a single thing, is 1.6 million. The performance of the building at 1.6 million is bang on to what we have at basically 1.6 million. So if you were to take Tesla out and you take out capital costs and that kind of investment, you could be increasing anywhere between 300,000 to 500,000 on top of that, because the costs that we necessarily wouldn't be putting in. But having said that, leasehold contract, their NOI is exactly what you think market would be. From that point, I'm not really going to go through the building facts. We've already been through that. The capitalization rates, I've already been through that. The tenant inducement, tenant allowances, non-recoverable, that's things of those nature, below line items, we've already adjusted for that. But when we go to the actual study, just to confirm with the study, again, we see that the average again, the average is $14.39 or 35 cents stabilized for the 3 years, $14.39 weighted average, and $14 median. Again, global, and then a little bit greater than that for the 2020 year. So you see the trend is pretty stable with a slight tick up. We see that the actual property itself is on page 6 of the study, which is page 33 of my brief. Second from the last. You see all the way through here, your minimum and maximum ranges hover between 13 and 1575. We see that the average is 1431, 1447, and 14, with a vacancy average of 14% approximately. For 17 CRUs that leased up within the 3 years. So overall, it's pretty much right where our model indicated. When you look back to what our model indicated, it was 1465. Again, independently, weighted average stabilized 1447 for the 3 years, but in the year leading up to it, the 2020 year, it was $15.09, $14.79, $15.09 for the weighted average, $14.79 for the average, and the median was $14.75. So if you look at the actual year itself, leading up to the reference year, it's a little bit above that. If you stabilize it out over 3 years, it's just a tick underneath it. But when you look at the performance of the building from the NOI standpoint versus what our model is, it's basically bang on. So from that, I think 23,510,000 is a very accurate number from both a leasehold and a contract, leasehold contract and from a pretty simple market basis, at least at the same point. Multiple questions.
Thank you. Mr. Navarro, do you have any questions?
Yes. So, in terms of the review that you've done, this has been, again, this is the model speaking.
Model from the briefs.
Okay.
And independently verified from the North Street study.
Okay. And you reviewed all of the leases in place?
Yeah, I went through the INEs and financials for 6 years.
Okay. And in terms of your capitalization rate, that is 6.75. Okay. And that is the same that you used for, not to bring the other property, but the previous property, it's the same cap rate. Is that the standard cap rate that you use for B classes? Yes.
The rents may go up or down depending on
Okay. Now, in terms of the parking, again, that is also model driven. You haven't reviewed any of the parking rents or anything like that.
As far as parking, I just glossed over them. They're on page 3.
But this is the model, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And just simply what I indicated, when you look at it from a monthly parking, it's coming in on what it is, but when you look at it from a transit parking model, we typically get greater. But here on this subject property, I don't believe we have much of a weekend event for transient parking at all. I don't believe there's any.
Right. You wouldn't have people parking for a jet skiing at this location.
You may have like a lawyer running across the street if you know someone, that kind of thing. But for 83 stalls, it's pretty much leased up to the tenants of the building. There is no extra revenue.
Okay. Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Navarro. Ms. Linklater, do you have any questions?
Just one question. Mr. Pohl, did you have a chance to inspect this property?
No, I haven't inspected this property. I've never inspected this property. I've been in the building, but I've never inspected it.
Oh, okay. Do you know when it was last inspected?
I couldn't tell you that.
Okay. That's all my questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Stevens, do you have any questions? Oh, you're on mute still.
Sorry, my apologies. I do not have any questions. Thank you.
Okay. And I do not have questions. So Mr. Navarro, please, when you're ready.
And 386 Broadway, this is, you can see the picture there on page 6 and 7. It is on the south side of Broadway, near the law courts and near the legislature. In terms of the description of the property, I will just skip over that and head right into the meat and potatoes. So again, we use the same lease comparables that we used on the other Class B buildings. So we don't need to look at that because we haven't gone with those. We've gone with the actuals in place. And so I will, what I'll do is I'll briefly go over some of these leases. So, so starting with unit 100, we've placed a $14 rent on it. This is 830 square feet only. It was previously occupied by Royal Sun Alliance and vacated after a month. They were on a month-to-month lease. Now, another unit on the main level, which is 660 square feet. This is Collier's. We have a $13 rent. And again, the lease started in January 20, so we think that this is at market. Merits of Manitoba, 722. That is a $14 rent going from November 18th to October 23. And again, on 105, you can see also that there is, again, Collier's project leaders. So they have a separate space here, $14 rent, and ending in September 24. And again, this steps at a later date. So there are steps included in this property. It's just that we haven't reached that step date yet. There is quite a bit of provincial space in here, and those leases are what they are. The one that I will speak to is 903, and that is Dealey Fabry Sealand, 8,643 square feet at 975. This is semi-gross rent, and we've netted that down to 975. We've used roughly 475 in unrecovered expenses. So that is why that particular rent is lower than some of the others. It was a semi-gross rent. So we have a total of $1,742,093, and giving us a net market rent of $13.41. On page 15, we look at the vacancy. This building has had some vacancy issues, and as you can see over the years, starting in 2014 all the way to 2020, it's never below 10%. So we have adjusted the vacancy on this property slightly to 12%. And we've used a shortfall rate of $12 per square foot. Non-recovered expenses, again, we've gone through this many times. We used the 5% plus 2% for the structural allowance, giving us a 7% total. And in terms of the parking income, I will just skip over that because, again, we've agreed with the assessor in terms of the parking. So we've allocated the same amount for the parking space, so there will be no difference there. The main point of contention is obviously the rent, where we have a $13.41 rent. On page 18, if you look at that, it just summarizes the two approaches, the two income streams. So again, we've done with $13.41 rent, 12% vacancy, 12% for shortfall, 5% for, that is actually non-recoverable. It's just called management, but it's not the recoverable type of management. 2% other storage, giving us a net operating income of $1,253,234. 7% capitalization rate, $17,903,041. And in terms of the parking, I can probably skip over that since there is no disagreement with the city on that. So on page 20, you can see the full summary. We have a net operating income total of $1,356,320, capitalization rate of 7%, giving us an income value of $19,375,999, or $19,376,000 rounded. In terms of the submission, we've obviously included some income and expense information as we have with the other properties that we've looked at today. I will skip over that, and you can just go to I believe it is your page 113. So you can see the lobby area. It has had a recent refresh. I believe that was, that was done more recently at a cost of about $500,000. The next page over, you can see the main floor. This is the Collier space, the parkade below. The 9th floor. On page 116, you'll see some of the building mechanicals. 19. If you skip to 120, again, that is the 8th floor. 7th floor on page 121, it's vacant space. 122 is also vacant space. 5th floor is occupied. 124, 125, that's all the same unit on the 5th floor. And on the 5th floor, there's also some vacant spaces that I took some pictures of. 3rd floor vacant spaces. And the remainder is primarily just vacant areas that we went through. So I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Navarro. Mr. Pohl, do you have any questions?
Yes, I do. Similar to the last couple of properties. You can turn to the page 36.
Yeah.
Leasehold performance of the building's net operating income unadjusted is 1.637 million.
Right.
The year after that, if you turn to page,
You said unadjusted?
that's what they're reporting.
Okay.
What they're
Right.
Right. On page 56 for the 2019 year, we're reporting 1,758,311.
Okay.
On page 99, which is the 2018 year, we're reporting 1,887,000.
Yeah.
So your net operating income total is on your page 20, which is 1,356,000, correct?
Yeah, total 1,356,320. Yeah.
Last question. Apologize for talking all the way through this today. Provincial leases. Provincial leases, you say you've netted out. One is at $15. Copy of them are $15.75 for the series.
Yeah.
And then we have another one at 508 at 1962 and 2087, and then 302 and 2150, 2250. How come there's a discrepancy since usually they're leased out in the same way within the same building?
Sorry, which one?
Like you see provincial leases in at what appears to be a gross rent total and then
Right.
semi-gross rent. Usually they're always a semi-gross rent on a base year.
Yeah.
Adjustments are made as you go along that fall off roll.
Yeah.
My study of all the
So
properties-
16, you're looking at in particular space 302?
Well, there's a few in there on the rent.
Yeah.
There are 302 and then there's 508.
Right.
And then if you look at the other 15, which is 200, 1575, and then if you look at 609, 610, it's like 1575 both. And then at 1575 again.
Right.
And then if you look at 906, it's 1575 again. So what would be the discrepancy between the way their leases are set up within the building?
So there are some spaces that have been, they call it turnkey spaces. So they involve some TIs, but those haven't been adjusted. So the rent started, for example, on 306 at $20 and then stepped. Okay. But we have to remember that these are semi-gross rents, so we are adjusting them to net. But that is the basic reason, is that there have been some turnkey leases in here which have started at different rates.
No questions I have.
Thank you very much. Ms. Linklater, do you have any questions?
I have no questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Stevens?
I have no questions.
Okay, thank you. And nor do I. So we are now on item number 4 on our agenda. 225 Gary Street. Mr. Poole, whenever you're ready, please.
Bear with me here. I think that's all they owe me, so I think this will go fairly quick from this point on.
Okay, so 225 is, or only item 1, 2, and 3 were the OFBs?
I believe it is.
Okay.
Or what we consider this is, so.
Yep.
File number 222407. Roll number is 120931411100. 225 Gary Street. The 2023 assessment is for $2,156,000. It is an older building, built in 1945. Addition put on as well as upgraded. It's going to be a bit of renovation done in 2010. We have a leasable area of 7,500 approximately square feet. We go to page 2. There is a bit of a dated sale, obviously, in $6 million. That's about 9 years pre-reference, so it's not really reflective of market any longer. But having said that, commercial property generally increased over the last decade. So if you look at the property, it is on page 13. It is adjacent to 215 Gary, B prime, large B prime. I don't have any clear balls in the property. On page 14 onwards is the INE. There's no vacancy. Looks like they check off the net. And then as you go along, they check off property taxes, they check off sewer, water and snow removal, waste and snow removal, sorry, and then marketing. So it appears it's checked off the net and also semi-gross. So when you look at it, we have what we have. There is 18 stalls outdoor. They're at $175 a stall. They indicated on their COVID form, which is on page 16, minor impact. So on page 23 is the only substantial permit that I found on the property, again indicating that they had a small renovation done for a tenant. Again, 2001 price, obviously 200,000, but that's the only real work that I've had. So that the property's had done. When we go to the marketplace, I looked at OFS's citywide. Some are downtown, most are outside of downtown. There were 292,000 square feet. Average CRU size of 3,200 square feet. Median CRU size at 1,600 or so square feet. Average rate of 1585. Weighted average at 16. Median at 15. Min maxes are at 1025 or 102250, I should say. So roughly, you're looking at $15 to $16 range or so. More downtown. I looked at more what it was comparably would be, which would be a Class C building. So we looked at 59 comparables downtown. It's leased up approach to the reference dates. Total square foot area of 353,000. Average CRU size of about 6,000 square feet. Median CRU size of about 4,200 square feet. Average is about 1262. Weighted average of 13. And median is at 12. The max is at 7. And then parking comparables, as you see on page 7, it is in downtown on 4th Street. High demand for parking, obviously, in the location where it is. So when we go to the market, when we go to see the model produced on page 8, for 7,568 square feet, we have $14.84 a square foot, which produces about $1.50 or so higher than the average for downtown C's. But having said that, it is an application. So it's more reflective of a bit better rent that you get in a prime location where it is in Port, with ample parking all the way around, as you can see from the aerial photograph. Plus, they have on-site parking for whoever is your tenant. You got additional parking all the way around it. So, our standard parameters do apply for OFSs at 11% for vacancy, $8 for shortfall, 3% for non-recoverables, which produces the net operating income of $90,296, capped at 5.45%, gives us $1,657,000 for the building rounded, and then for the parking, $104 a stall, which gives us at 18 stalls, gives us a net operating income of $22,464, capped at 4.5%. Gives us just shy of 500,000, 499,000 rounded. On the following page is page 10, a synopsis of the two, which is 2,156,000. Given prime location, you're in a cluster heavy office. You have lots of parking all the way around. You have on-site parking for your tenants. It's not a lot, 18 stalls, but your building isn't it's only 7,500 square feet. You have ample parking on site and around site for your tenancies, and you're in a pretty good district, the CBA or Center Business District for office property. So I think 2,156,000 is reasonable. I think it's a pretty good test that even 10 years earlier was sold for 1.6 million. We see the market increasing substantially over the last decade. We should put less weight on a sale that far away, obviously, but it gives a good indication that the market has increased and rents that are in place are. With that, I'm open to questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Navarro, do you have any questions?
Yeah, so the suburban office rent comparables that you use predominantly are coming from suburbs, correct?
Yeah, that's the.
Okay. And typically, I mean, just from observation, suburban office rents, they tend to be quite healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And in terms of suburban office rents from the downtown, you really haven't presented very much, have you?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
Nearly 59 comparables.
Right. Okay. So on the topic of that, you're bringing forth OFC rents, which, I mean, look, I've even used one OFC rent that you'll see, but we're not using any of the OFC parameters here, are we?
There would be similar, but I mean, generally speaking, when I'm looking at I'm looking at what an office tenant would pay. Where would they locate? Are they located in OFS? Minimal downtown, it's usually suburban, that's why it's OFS. But there are some downtown. But generally, an OFC would be in relationship to this. You see that it can acquire government tenancy, that's a better than average tenant. You would expect a bit better than average. The covenant on that would be stronger than an average tenancy. So, all things being equal, I don't think to put a rent in place that would be of a typical OFC to make it better.
Mr. Poole, can I just interrupt? We can't hear you very well, at least I can't.
I'm trying to do it. Apologize.
No, that's okay.
Where did I tell off? Or where did you stop?
Well,
all of it? Basically what I said was there's minimal OFSs in the downtown center business district. There are some, but few that actually lease up given the populace that are down there. So my check is to do what an OFS for citywide. And then my check is to do what a tenancy that is in the subject property would pay for similar property, which would be your C-class buildings. It is a government tenancy in the province of Manitoba. They require a certain quality of space. And given that this is definitely not a B, it is a C to a bit better than average C. I don't think it's inappropriate to be bringing in the rent range for a C-class building to show what they get. Typically, government of province of Manitoba occupies C's in lower B-class buildings. So you see that throughout the downtown. So that's why the C's are in there.
So the actual rent, if I'm looking at this correctly, is
which page?
Sorry. You're page 14. 100,120.56.
Where we're which page 14?
That would be line 108.
Line 108. That's you're looking what I'm looking at.
100,120.56. Okay. And the model has predicted 112, so slightly above. Yeah. Okay. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Navarro. Ms. Linklater, do you have any questions?
I have none. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Stevens?
Mr. Poole, just the cap rate, it does seem to fall outside of your lower end range here. Can you just maybe explain why you think that the model might have put that on there?
Reason why it's lower, generally speaking, you have a building that is a small building roughly 7,500 square feet, you'd have a higher ability for demand for that building in the downtown. There's a lot of potential purchasers who could compete for that building versus the building adjacent to, say, 215 Gary. Only very few select potential purchasers would be able to compete for a building of that size. So when you have a greater amount of demand or potential demand, you're going to get a greater amount of you're going to have a greater sale price per square foot for larger building, obviously, of any of the other towers. So this is why the main factor is that it is for that. It's not that it's a better income per square foot generator, just that it's there would be better, greater demand for it. If you're going to be an occupier of a certain size CRU as a tenant, or I should say as a tenant, you'd be looking to purchase something like this as an owner occupier, right? So you get a greater demand for both owner occupier and also.
Just didn't catch the last sentence there.
If you're an owner occupier, this is something you'd be able to purchase on a per square foot basis.
Okay. Yep.
Versus being a tenant, and if you were ever going to buy it and then also rent it out, you'd have a greater ability to do that as well. So it's not like I was getting into, like, there's only a select amount of players or potential purchasers that can purchase greater buildings than this, right? You're not gonna, this building here, if you would increase it to, say, a 5-story building, Class C, it's a different marketplace. And all of a sudden, not at a greater, too high of a purchase price, so you'd have more potential buyers for this. So.
Okay, thank you very much. That's all the questions I had. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pohl. Mr. Navarro, when you're ready, please, your presentation.
Okay. 225 Gary Street. If you can turn to page 6, we have an outside picture of it and its general location. So it is a rather small building with adjacent parking. It has an effective age of 1967. And in terms of the income approach, which is the approach that we're using, you can turn to page 11. So we looked at several OFS and Class C rents. The ones that I've highlighted in yellow, I think are the ones that I'm suggesting are the better comparables for this property. However, the average from this sample is 1121 and 1167. We've gone with a rent of $12.20. And as you can see that there is a rent in place there from December 11 to November 21. We haven't used that contract rent. We've gone with a higher rent of $12.20, which we think is reflective of this type of property in the downtown. Now, in terms of parking, I don't believe there is any disagreement on the parking rate itself, so the net operating income. So I will just glide over that. In terms of vacancy allowance, this is the vacancy allowance that we use for OFS downtown, which is 11% shortfall, and non-recoverables are what they are. So if you turn to page 16, you can see our workup here. So we've gone with $12.20 rent. That gives us $92,330. As I mentioned below or before, the income for the property is around $100,000 per year. We've applied 11% vacancy, $8 shortfall, 5% for management and other expenses, which is structural. Net operating income of $69,761 and a capitalization rate of 6.50. And I believe that is probably where most of the disagreement in our property valuations lie. Again, the assessor went with a cap rate of 4.50. which we suggest is probably not reflective of its risk and you know, the taking into account the age, location, everything else. Our study suggests that Class S or suburban ranges between 6 to 7.50. We've made an adjustment to 6.50. That's what we've gone with. And in terms of the overall value of the property, we're suggesting a value of $1,522,000. And that is my presentation. In addition to this, I've included some income and expense information, which I think the assessor has already included also. So yeah, that's it. I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Navarro. Mr. Poole, do you have any questions?
Just a couple. Obviously, it's low 9 years earlier for 1.6.
Right.
Did you put any mind to that?
No, I think the market has changed since then.
Has it gone down or is it stable or decreased?
I think rents have remained stable.
Over 10 years?
Huh?
Over a 9 year period, 10 year period?
Well, I don't know about a 9 or 10 year period, but as we looked into your study, I mean, the OFB was showing that the rents were fairly stable over a 6 year period. So again, that is why we did the review of these leases. We think that they're representative of probably what they would get in the marketplace for this type of property.
Typically what's gone.
The cap rate, I think, is the issue.
And then that's where I'm leading you to. Yeah. Risk, obviously, all components of risk is brought into a cap rate.
Sure.
Risk on the return, risk of the return. I can get it, but realistically, it's risk in place. So we see market interest rates that were going downwards, capitalization rates were going downwards. So generally, we see that this building has the capacity to have an anchor, a government tenant, who's a single occupancy building, and they can attain that. Provincial, federal governments have requirements for their tenancies. This is not an average to below average CROMS. It would have to be an average to greater than that, right? Generally, to attain a tenant such as this.
I would say that it's probably average. I haven't been in it as well, so I can't.
But generally, governments don't occupy floor spaces for their employees.
Well, I would say that there are certain requirements when government comes in, and those have to be reflected in the finish. But if you look at government, they will lease throughout every type of category, whether it's A, B, C, D, which is the heritage, and obviously suburban office. So they occupy whatever space, and yes, it does have to suit their needs.
So generally speaking, this would be on an average to below average for risk. Is what I'm getting at.
Well,
the lower end of the category.
So one of the things that I looked at was, for example, if you turn to page 12, is you can see that the lease started in December of 11 and ends in November of 21. So that is one thing. It's also a single occupant building, which also I think would add to the risk profile of the property. So I'm quite comfortable with 6.5 that we put on it.
So my questions after this.
Thank you, Mr. Poole. Ms. Linklater, do you have any questions?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Stevens?
I have no questions either. Thank you.
Okay, and neither do I. So it's 10 to 4. I guess in front of us, we still have 4 more. We're obviously not going to get through them all because we don't have time for that. Do we have time for one more, or shall we call it now?
I think we could do 114, Gary. Pretty straightforward.
Oh.
Let's go with one.
Okay. Then, Mr. Poole, you can start off with 114, Gary, please.
I'm gonna just I have one question to ask before when I'm turned away and speaking to Jeremy, can you hear me?
We can hear you better than we can hear Mr. Poole. At least
Yeah, when
I can.
yeah, when Mr. Poole turns his head, his voice doesn't carry as well, but we're
Okay.
able to hear you. Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
if Mr. Poole doesn't speak into the microphone, I'm not really getting much.
So are we doing 114, Jerry, or 155 fourth, or which one are we doing?
Well, I think we should just keep going down the order of the agenda.
Good order.
So after,
Okay.
I'm sorry, did I get it mixed up? I have my item number 5 is 114, Gary.
Okay.
So roll number is 221042. Sorry, file number is 221042. Roll number is 1209 318400. The roll number or year is for the 2023 year. The assessed value is 50,669,000. The building is built in one of the sections of the building was built in 1950. There's an addition put on in 1990. Effective year is about 1995. Leasable area is 74,248. There is no parking on site, but they do lease the Civic Park, the Union Parkade, which is right behind it. I'll get to that in a moment. We see the property is on page 3. And it's a pretty decent write-up. 3-story building, Center Business District. And again, just as I indicated, a building built in 1950 with an addition, but there was a heavy renovation done to it. And I'll get to that in a moment. And there is off-site parking, which they secured behind the building. So if you look at page 8, you see the building, and then there's the parkade, which is right behind it. So when you see parking, it's associated with an off-roll, parkade. So as you can see, page 9 is pictures of the property. Page 10 is pictures of the property. And I went through the property because this property was used for a number of years as a comparison, and I'll get to that in a moment. By also at the Board of Revision, I'll get to that in a moment. Page 11 shows the permits associated with the property. Not too much, other than the addition that already went on in the 90s. Up until you get to 2015, when there was a $7.2 million interior renovation. And this is when the government, the provincial government, who's the tenant, Provincial Family Services and Consumer Affairs went in. I believe it was Highways and Transportation before that. So it was always a government tenancy, but they switched. So when you see the 7.2 million, this property, and I'll get to, before we get to that, we'll switch over to page 21. And again, I contacted, in this case, it was Altus, but I guess their Ontario office. And I'll just read, as we discussed, I'm investigating the lease at 214 Gary Street. His tenant is province of Manitoba. During the tenancy, the property was experienced a $7.2 million interior renovation during 2016-17. The net rent reported on the income expense questionnaire jumps from $10.25 to $15 net. Can you confirm that the tenant paid for the renovation work, which led to a reduction in rent for the tenant improvements, or that the owner paid for the renovation of the below average space, which then correlates to a higher achieved rent for the improved space? Thanks for your help on this matter. I never got a response. No response back from their Altus, not Altus here in Winnipeg, but I guess the property owner goes outside of this branch of Altus. So I'm simply looking to see why, who paid for that. Is there a tenant inducement? Because what I see is what I indicated throughout the study, clear pays, no fees. You see a stagnant rent and low rent, and then all of a sudden work gets done, and then it jumped significantly, about 50% increase in rent. So I'm looking at what's going on there. I tried to investigate it. I wasn't able to get any confirmation on that. So on page 22, just shows one of the briefs that Altus was using in the 2014 cycle. This comparable was used quite a bit by themselves, which they use the $10.25 at market. So when I'm going through it, I tried to ascertain, was it the government who paid, or was it the tenant, or was it the owner who paid? Because if it's the owner who paid, then a $15 rent is reflective of the new improved space. But if it's the government who paid for $7.25 million, it doesn't make sense to put a $15 lease on in there as well. So I tried to do my due diligence. Came up with an inconclusive response. So from that point, we'll go back to the income stream. I should say we'll go back to the start of the income expense questionnaire, which is current on page 12. Again, blank. They submit blank COVID forms and they submit financials. So in this case here, on page 16, you see that they have virtually no reduction for tenant inducements. They have about a $5,700, cost. This is nothing. You see that the potential rent is $1.436 million. As you go through the income stream, when you get to page 19, everything unadjusted for, including parking, which is off-site, it is at $1,262,000, or sorry, $1,262,000 is what their net is. You can see on the next page, on page 20, the rent did escalate from $15 to $16.50. Realistically, you're looking at the net operating income. Not really what it always comes down to. It's not just the rent, it's not the big, see how the building's performing and what the net operating income is, minus any non-recoverables that K+C to exclude. Obviously, you're not including mortgages or capital costs involved in that. Sometimes it's put down. But just what the operating income is and operating expense. So when we go through our analysis on page 4, we see for a better OFS, or this would be obviously a B prime, a tenancy in a B building with renovation that took place. We see an average rent wide, which is $15.04 for one CRU, and then the other one at $12,015.98. So the average is $15.19. So it's just a bit above average for OB, which you would expect given the renovation that occurred, as well as right in line with OFSs. But again, this is a significantly large OFS. So when you're looking at the leasable area at 74,248 square feet, that's a potential rent of 1.1 million approximately. Our standard parameters apply. 11% for vacancy laws. Non-recoverable expenses at 3%, shortfall at $8, which gives us our net operating income of $908,802. Again, that's the only net operating income we have. We see that it's significantly greater on the actual lines that are reported by some almost 328,000. Capped at 5.8%. We see a building that is at one point was an age building, but a heavy investment made back into it. We see a large addition in the 90s, and again, all things being equal, they're achieving a rent of approximately $16.50 at the reference date. So capped at 5.8% gives us our $15,669,000. So there is the only one income stream, even though there is a bit of parking associated with it. But again, that's off-site. Other than that, it's fairly straightforward workup. With that, any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Pohl. Mr. Navarro, do you have any questions?
Yes. Mr. Pohl, under the downtown zoning bylaw, is there a requirement for parking in downtown for office buildings? No, there is.
So sorry, no, not for office, outside of it.
Okay. And so you noted that there is parking income coming in there, correct?
Partly, yeah, from
the adjacent lot. So they're having to lease out space in an adjacent property. So why is that not being taken off?
Pardon me?
Why is that not being taken off the main holding?
We're looking at it on a simple basis.
We would look at it from a simple basis. They're having to lease space on a property that's not
They're
theirs.
looking at it from an encumbered price by lease, which is a leasehold contract analysis.
So if you're including parking,
I'm not only,
you're not including
in my
parking.
brief, I did not.
Um,
It's done on a fee simple basis.
right. Second of all, you noted that you called Altus in Ontario to discuss. Did you discuss it with anybody in our office?
Let me be clear. I called the contact on the apologize, not doing this. The contact on the IME. The IME person gave me this person's number for Altus. Contacted them. They didn't respond.
Okay. So,
we did talk,
Yeah.
obviously, but they didn't respond. Back.
yeah, and I mean, I can discuss that during my presentation, so I will leave my questions at that.
Thank you, Mr. Navarro. Ms. Linklater, do you have any questions?
I have no questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens.
No, I think I'm good, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Navarro.
I'll make this as quickly as possible. So,
Thanks.
Okay.
okay. I know
I'm
you're
just hanging on.
you're looking rough there. Okay.
I got more to do.
Yeah. So, the first thing that I'd like to point out is Mr. Pohl was asking about the rent itself and whether there was who paid for the work. What I can tell you is that the owner paid for the work. And that rent is reflective of market rent. There is no inducements that have been taken out. So the rent is what it is. There was some costs, but if I recall, around $500,000 to the province for the addition of some removable wall systems that are effectively chattels because they can be taken out. So we don't consider those in the general improvement of this property. The rent is what it is. As you can see, we've gone with that rent. The only, I think, difference is the capitalization rate. The assessor is below 5 or below 6, where we are using 6.5 for suburban office in the downtown, and we're not deviating from that. I believe that is really the only difference. We are asking for $14,595,000 rounded. And the rest of the property, as you can see, in starting on page 33, I did a pretty detailed inspection of the property. So I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Navarro. Mr. Pohl, do you have any questions?
Yeah, mainly just wanted confirmation on what I was indicating. There are no tenant inducements. It looked to me like they only paid for the renovation and they got the rents that we got associated with them improving the physical capital.
Yes.
Which is,
They did the work themselves.
which is exactly what you would expect. But in earlier, for Greatness Life, it flipped where they paid and got a discount, which we believe in contract and also added.
We disagree with you on that, but yes.
But generally, property owners generally improve their own property, not tenant. So in this case here, when I was investigating it, thank you for confirming it, it played out exactly how I suspected. As far as the rent, typically you would see about $1, $1.50 or so around there for parking per square foot. How many actual stalls are contracted out?
I'm not aware of the total stalls that they rent out.
And that's where I
But you're wrong about the locations. So they do rent in the parkade next door, but they also rent from behind 280 Broadway.
I didn't know that. All I know is from coming from Miss Warham, and also from what they indicated on the portfolio, they have 71 stalls. My understanding was it was the parkade adjacent to it.
Not all.
So all things being equal, I was just asking what the actual cost for the stalls were that they were paying. I couldn't find.
No.
So that may be the difference between the $1.50 or so.
Yeah. And if that was in there, we would have deducted it.
Okay, so thank you. That's all the follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Pohl. Ms. Linklater, do you have any questions?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Ms. Stevens?
I do not either, thank you.
Okay, and neither do I then. So that concludes item number 5. Yes, Samisha? Yes?
Can we move forward to 180 King? I believe we have our confirmation on that.
Yeah,
So we can get rid of that.
Okay, let's just get over there then. 180 King. Go ahead, Mr. Pohl. You want to introduce the property, please?
Bear with me, I'll see. Must be losing my mind. Do we have it on the? We have it on the.
Here, my copy.
Number,
If you got my copy, I'll just.
Yeah, just there.
I know I'll find it when I get back to the office.
Which one? King?
it's number 8 on the agenda.
Yeah, here it is. No, it's gone.
It's okay. Never mind. It's on the. I can. Sure, it's on my desk, stuck to another piece. Okay. So the file number is 223206. Roll number is 1309603930 180 King. The 2023 assessment is for $796,000. I'll go through a brief explanation for it. It's in the Dynasty Building. It's built in 1987. Leasable area is 10,748 square feet. It is owner occupied by the Winnipeg Chinese Cultural Center. We have on page 5 a workup at $8.56 a square foot. And again, we have a bid for a Class C building. We have 12% for vacancy. We have 3% for non-recoverable expenses. We have $10 for shortfall and $8.25 cap. $8.25% cap. I apologize. Been a long day. Capitalized out the NOI is $65,636, gives us $795,588. Obviously rounded to $796. On page 9 is the photos of the property. Page 10 is the income expense questionnaire. So, and then the COVID report, and a COVID brief as well. So basically, you go back to the comps, which are on page 3 for C's. I really don't have any rents at this range. We put it at the lowest range that we have. This has been to case management a few times, the municipal board, I should say, at the municipal board and case management. I think it's best suited that maybe we discuss it at that point, because it's kind of an odd property. It's more, it's quite weird. Different branches. It's more of, when we went to the building, it's more of a gymnasium, meeting area in an office building. So it's not quite fitting what the building itself is generally assessed as. It's hard to phrase it any other way.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Navarro?
Yeah, as Jeremy mentioned, we'll ask for confirmation and we'll continue to discuss this property at the municipal board.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Navarro. Just before we finish, I'm going to ask the panel if they have any questions. Ms. Linklater?
I have no questions. Thank you.
And
Ms. Stevens?
I thank you. No
Okay,
questions.
thank you. Then that concludes item number 8. Thank you, Mr. Pohl and Mr. Navarro, for getting through the bulk of the properties on this agenda. So that's great. Only 2 remaining to be carried over at another point.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Is anyone on the panel for tomorrow? For mine properties for tomorrow?
No,
What is your hearing? What date? Tomorrow afternoon? No, not me.
I'm in that hearing, Mr. Pohl.
You're in it?
I'm in it tomorrow afternoon.
I don't know if we'll be here tomorrow. I might go.
Well, I hope you feel better, Jeremy.
I can, I will.
This is a nasty bug that's going around, that's for sure.
So Carrie and Cindy, do you want to just take a few minutes before we
Sure.
start our
Take a minute. Yeah,
deliberations?
thanks. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Let's
Thank
just
you,
do that.
thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
thank you
you.
both. But Jeremy, somebody else won't be